Refueling was the French ship, the Quebec, HMCS Quebec. When you refuel, all military vehicles on the ocean have to turn out of the way for civilian traffic. So there was an ocean liner coming toward us. So as the refueling ship, the one I was on, turned 5 degrees to port, the Quebec ship was supposed to turn 5 degrees to port also. They didn't. They turned 10 degrees to port. So the wire between the two ships sprung. I was on the top in the mast section of the boat, and all I heard was hit the deck and then wing. It took all the radio masts off the ship. That's how close I came to having a grave in the ocean. So I always remember that song. So In Flanders Fields was written by John McCrae for the death of his friend. After he finished it, he didn't like it. He threw it away. Another soldier found it, picked it up, and sent it to England. The major newspapers in England turned it down. But there was a magazine called Punch. They published it. Interesting little story. In 7 days, we will be celebrating one of the most solemn days in Canada, Remembrance Day. It's been flexible and includes wars from prior World War I to World War I, Second World War, the Korean War, and our latest war in Afghanistan. So my talk this morning will be non-political. And when you read all the stories, you will find lots of politics involved in them. So I will center my talk on memorials and stories. Nice stories. And he took bread and gave thanks and brake it and gave unto them, saying, This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. The words, this do in remembrance of me, are captured in churches and altars around the world. They are repeated by pastors and priests every time we eat bread and drink the wine or juice at religious gatherings. This is a clear command of Jesus. Whether we call it the Lord's Supper or communion, there are two promises in Scripture that empower the sacrament. One, all Christians are to maintain the practice of the Lord's Supper. The Last Supper brings with the hope that Jesus will return. Amen. Jesus himself stated that this was the last time he would drink the cup with his disciples in his life, and that he would return someday and drink it with them again. This is a beautiful, blessed assurance that Jesus sacrificed for our salvation, while glorious and worthy of all praise, is not the end of the story. That's right. Jesus will come again and restore us to himself, and we will eat and drink with him in heaven forever. The big difference is that our sailors, soldiers, and airmen will not return until Jesus does. So how do we remember them? We have ceremonies. We build statues and memorials. There are other ways, but these are the main ways. In Canada, there are 6,293 war memorials and countless others around the world. Our job as parents and caregivers is to educate our children, our grandchildren, so that they will know what happened. As I said, Remembrance Day covers all wars, but at one time it didn't. So the War of 1812 was Canada's really first war. And so it was covered by the British, and fencible regiments. Fencible regiments are like platoons, if you will, in each province. So in Lower Canada, there was a fencible regiment that was involved in the War of 1812. One of my relatives was a sergeant in the Quebec fencible regiment. As we go on from there, we have, just if you could pull up that memorial for Ridgeway again. Yeah. So, Ridgeway was a battle called, normally known as the Fenian Raids. Fenian Raids, Irish people from the States wanting to get favors from the United States government, decided they would attack Canada, which they did. Canada lost, but they went back to the States. So to honor them, we have Decoration Day. And that statue, that memorial. The Decoration Day was a day set aside to clean war graves. Another memorial was Paardeberg Day. Paardeberg Day was for the South African wars that Canada was involved in. So the Fenian Raids were controversial to the government because we lost. So they didn't want to acknowledge it. 25 years later, the veterans forced them to acknowledge it. Okay. Over the top, amid the carnage and confusion of no man's land, stepped Highland regimental bagpipers, screaming out the charge. It was the most awful music to be heard by men who have the Highlanders against them. And with fixed bayonets and hand grenades, they stormed the German trenches, wrote Sir Philip Gibbs, one of the 5 official British reporters. The pipers and the men themselves were nicknamed by the Germans as Die Damen aus der Hölle. Now, I don't know if I pronounced that exactly right, but it means ladies from hell. For their distinctive tartan kilts and unparalleled bravery, The pipers were there for morale, and the Germans knew they would rally the troops. We are all pretty well aware of what happened in the First World War. There are several memorials. The tomb of the unknown soldier lying in front of Canadian War Memorial and the Vimy Memorial, I consider these two memorials to be significantly important. The Unknown Soldier Memorial holds the remains of an unknown soldier from a Canadian regiment. Corporal Nathan Cirillo, who was guarding that memorial on the 22nd of October, was shot and killed for no absolute reason at all. So I remember him, and I will always remember him. So when you go to Remembrance Day, these stories you're going to remember as you stand there. That's why you're there. So we look at Vimy Ridge Memorial. In my opinion, it has got to be the most dynamic piece of art completed by Canadian artists. If you want to know more about all the figurines, there are 20 of them. You simply need to look it up. I want to focus on the two features. The one, the torch. Are you ready to carry it? The other figure stands in the middle there. Mother Canada. A beautiful sculpture. I have been to the Vimy Memorial 3 times. And I stand in awe. And she is looking over the battlefield for her soldiers, for the men of Canada. So Walter Allward, who was a soldier, was the sculptor of that and made, designer of that memorial. In 1921, in an interview, he said that his idea for the memorial was inspired by a wartime dream that he had never forgotten. When things were at their blackest in France, I went to sleep one night after dwelling on all the muck and misery over there. My spirit was like a thing tormented. I dreamed I was in a great battlefield. I saw our men going in by the thousands and being mowed down by the sickles of death and suffering beyond endurance at the sight. I turned my eyes and found myself looking down on an avenue of poplars. Suddenly, through the avenue, I saw thousands marching to the aid of our armies. They were the dead. They rose in masses, filed silently by, and entered the fight to aid the living. So vivid was this impression that when I woke, it stayed with me for months. Without the dead, we were helpless. So I have tried to show this in this monument to Canada's fallen, what we owe them. The victory at Vimy Ridge was a major success for the Allies, specifically for Canada, to prove the worthiness of the fight. And alongside the Europeans defending their homelands, due to all the Canadian troops working together and becoming triumphant over 50 years after Canada's dominion. This battle is often referred to as the birth of a nation. This memorial is dedicated to all who served during World War I, and the names of 11,285 men are inscribed. Let me rephrase that. The names of 11,285 inscribed are Canadians with no known grave. But we move on to World War II. We know who that guy is. Never was so much owed by so many to so few. It was a speech after the Battle of England. Winston Churchill mobilized the British people and never backed down in the face of adversity. But that owing to so few, everybody in that World War II is included in that, in my opinion. The Second World War is closer to our generation than previous conflicts. Some will have grown up with our grandfathers and fathers who were involved. However, there are more to war than the military component. The home front was held together by the women left behind. Use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without, was their motto. Canada had its own Rosie the Riveter. The roles taken by some were getting used to. But by the end of the war, women had proved themselves to be, and to the country, that they could do any job a man could do, and do it well. Canadian women made important contributions on the home front during the war years. They supported our country's war effort, not only in traditional roles, but also in unprecedented new ways. The Second World War has a lot of meaning to me, because my father was there. And I wonder if this was the attitude of kids on the prairies. My father was 16 years old when he joined the Manitoba Dragoons and went over to England to fight. He got found out and was sent home. He then jumped on the train that goes through Pilot Mound, Manitoba, and went to Calgary. He joined the Strathcona Horse, which is an artillery regiment, and went back over to England. And then, to be not found out, he became a commando under Lord Lovett. So he joined 4 Commando under the British as a Canadian. At the age of 17, the 19th of August, 1942, he went into Dieppe. In Dieppe, as you know, we lost over 900 men. We destroyed a regiment, the Royal Light Hamilton Infantry. I've been on that beach. You can't walk on it. The stones are like marbles. And you literally slip and slide. So I went over there with Claudine to do the 50th anniversary service. And as we marched through the streets of Dieppe, people were lined up 5 and 6 abreast. Every house, every building has a Canadian flag on it. It's an impressive sight. The other thing that impressed me in Europe was Holland. When I was 16 years old, my father and family, we went to Holland. And we went there for a reason. He wanted to connect to the leader of the Dutch resistance in Oldenzaal, Holland. Because during the Scheldt fight, he had been blown out of his little scout car. His job was to drive forward, wait till the enemy shot at him, and then back up like heck and let the tanks come in. So I asked him, why did you do this? You didn't have to. Well, he said, I could make $1.22 a day. The other thing is, he had 5 sisters and a younger brother. And he was the breadwinner because his father died when he was 4. So it's pretty impressive to me. But if you go to Holland during Liberation Day, on May 4th is Remembrance Day in Holland. May 5th is Liberation Day. When I went there at 16, we were in the cars. We pulled up to the border. One of the border agents moved us to another spot. And on that spot was a red carpet. The Dutch people will never forget. I talked to Marianne, and she said when she went to school, they used to walk through the town with Canadian flags. I also talked to Paul Zimmerman, who was German, lived next door to me. At the age of 4 or 5, when he was bombed out in his home, he had to walk across Germany, pushing his sister, who was about a year and a half in a baby carriage, along with his mother and part of the family. And they had to walk to the Czechoslovakian border. It's not a short walk. So you see, the war affected everybody. Also in Dieppe, there's a very interesting story that we heard. I was a member of the King's Own Cavalry Regiment, which was the Calgary tanks during the Second World War. On the Dieppe raid, one of the tank drivers was blinded, and he was looked after by a nun. 50 years later, when we went, those two met up because he remembered her voice. So then we go on to the Korean War. Canada played a valuable role in the Korean War from 1950 to 1953 as part of its position in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It included taking direct military action in support of capitalist South Korea against communist North Korea. Although rarely publicized, Canada proved to be one of the United States' major allies. We lost over 500 men, and they're buried over in Korea. This monument depicts a Canadian volunteer soldier and 2 Korean children. The girl is holding a bouquet of maple leaves. The boy is holding a bouquet of maple leaves and roses of Sharon, which is Korea's national flower. Anyone who doubts the reason or involvement of Canadians in Korea just needs to look where the country is today. I'm going to conclude with the Afghan War. And we know what happened there. We saw our men come back. 3 women didn't come back. Or they came back, I'm sorry, in coffins. So there is a monument that has been made, but it's not completed. So I don't show it until it is. But we do have something. The Highway of Heroes. There was a group called the Twos that wrote a song, but we're not going to play it. So we understand what Afghanistan was, and it's very political. So when I was doing research on it, I had to really say what I wanted to say. And I think that we know with the amount of injuries that our men and ladies come back with were terrible. So that leads me to my final talk. I call this the blank check. So when you join the military, you sign that and you give it to the government. And what it's saying is, I will fight and die for you, but you have to look after me. And it is our job to make sure that happens. Greater love has no one than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. Thank you for listening to me.